Man, this book is heavy. It's big too, but heavy. I need to work out more. Hi everyone, I'm Sean and today we are doing the January wrap-up. I'm in a little bit of a... Bird! Hey, I'm talking. I'm in a little bit of a reading slump, but I read 3 books in January. The first one is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is off of the top 1000 list. I probably would not have read it otherwise. I knew about this book. I've never seen any like TV show or movie about it. So I didn't really know about the book, except I knew that Anne was an orphan and that she was growing up on some kind of a frontiersy place and that she was kind of a troublesome girl. She was real fanciful with her imagination. So really I knew the book, but I don't know from what. A red flag popped up in the first chapter, and that is overuse of semicolons. Semicolons are very noticeable in narrative, and L.M. Montgomery used them a lot. I counted every single one in the first 10 paragraphs. That's how bad they were. And I think there were honestly like 14 or 15 of them in the first 10 paragraphs. So I thought that was pretty bad. It almost made me give up on the book right there because it was just driving me crazy, all the semicolons. But I ignored it and I got to the part where I met Anne and I started to fall in love with her. I really liked her attitude. I liked how she was always talking and she was just crazy with her imagination. And my favorite part really was real soon into the book. The sort of mother figure, her name is Marilla. She's like the woman of the household, the matriarch, I guess you could say. Marilla asks Anne her name, and Anne says, "Can you call me Cordelia?" And I just thought it was a hilarious line. Just out of nowhere, she just wants to be called Cordelia. And I could go into it more, but I really was thinking... Birds. I was really thinking that Anne could become one of my favorite literary characters. She reminded me a lot of my character Rose in my Samuel Creed books. And both are redheads. Birds! I'm talking! Anyway, so after meeting Anne, I really liked her, but the trouble was that was really the high point of the novel. After that, it never got any better. It never lived up to its potential. The novel became very repetitive with the chapters. And the way the chapters would work out is Anne would want to do something and she would encounter resistance to it. She wouldn't get to do it. And she would plead for a chance to do it. And then she would be allowed to do it. But then she would mess up and she would cry and be all just a mess. And then she would get a second chance and she would be the happiest girl in the world. And then she would go and mess up again, and the whole thing would just repeat over and over. And this was the way it seemed like every chapter worked out. And it really just got boring because of that. It was just so repetitive. Something I haven't mentioned yet is the writing beyond the semicolons I felt was pretty poor. The most striking example was the use of adverbs. That is saying like Anne said weepily or, you know, Anne said happily. You don't really need that in novels. It weakens the sentence. The book is written for children, so I'm not actually going to dock it a star because of this weak writing with the adverbs. Ordinarily, I probably would, but since it's written for children, I think it's okay to kind of over-explain things a little bit more. Another problem in the writing is that Anne would mention Marilla, especially by name, repeatedly in dialogue. So she may be talking to her, and in a paragraph she may say her name 3 times. And I think that's just pretty poor, because how often do you really use someone's name in conversation? When you're right there looking at them, you don't usually say their name. You just continue on with the dialogue. Now, one more thing I do want to say about this book is Anne's best friend, Diana. I had strong vibes that there was a romance between Anne and Diana. I don't know if I'm reading way too much into it, but reading this, I just could not help but feel that these characters, Anne and Diana, are in love with each other. And I don't just mean as friends. There is actually a strong romance hinted between them. I'm curious what you guys think about that. If you've read this book, did you also pick up on that? Or if you read this book, do you see the same thing I saw? Because I seriously saw Anne and Diana romantically in love with each other. Anyway, the rating for this book, it's definitely not a masterpiece, so right away you're down to 4-star territory. Because of the repetitive plot, the repetitive chapters all working out the same way, that I think docks the book a star. I'm not actually going to dock it a star for the pretty poor writing, the adverbs, and Anne always saying Marilla by name. So in the end, I'm going to give the book 3 stars. I enjoyed it. The main thing was it had potential, but it never really lived up to it. But I still would recommend this book. Okay, the next reviews kind of require some exposition. I went into the local bookstore and I was browsing for signed books, as I usually do. I'm a sucker for signed books. And I saw a signed book by Gore Vidal. I knew that name, Gore Vidal. Where did I hear of that name before? Well, one of the characters in one of my books buys a Gore Vidal book. So leave it to me to only know about someone because I myself wrote them into one of my books. How did I know about Gore Vidal before then? I have no clue. But it wasn't quite enough that the book was a must-buy for me, so I went home and I looked up Gore Vidal on YouTube, and I found this video, Gore Vidal debating Norman Mailer on the Dick Cavett show. I knew of Dick Cavett from his cameo in Forrest Gump. So I really enjoyed watching this debate, Vidal versus Mailer, because it was just so unlike anything you would see on TV today. You could have like Einstein on with Fallon and they would just throw water at each other. I really liked Gore Vidal in the debate because he was just so much more civil and he was so witty, he was so quick to think about what to say, and he just embarrassed Mailer, and Mailer just came off as completely arrogant and just unlikable. So after seeing this debate, I went back to the bookstore and I got Empire by Gore Vidal signed, as well as Tough Guys Don't Dance, signed by Norman Mailer. They're gorgeous books, I think. So Vidal is on the top 1,000 list for his book Burr, which is actually a part of this series. Empire is like book 5 in the series. And Mailer is on the list for his book Armies of the Night, which is actually the book I started off with. I did not read Tough Guys Don't Dance yet. I read Armies of the Night, and this book won Mailer a Pulitzer, which, if you don't know, I think the Pulitzer is a mark of a bad book. I've never read a book that won a Pulitzer that I really liked. The first red flag is that this book is written in third person, but it's autobiographical. It's like a memoirs. So it's written like Mailer went to the store. He walked down the bridge. Mailer thought whatever. And this is Mailer himself writing it, of course, but he's writing it in third person, which is pretty weird because it's like he's writing a book about himself from third person, but it's him doing it. So it's kind of like someone who interviews themselves and posts it online. It's kind of just another arrogant move. It's like, why would you interview yourself? Why would you write a book about yourself in third person? It's pretty ridiculous, and I thought it may have been a big issue for me. But it turned out really not to be, because I tried really hard to just ignore it. Some reviews of this book have said that it's a real refreshing take because Mailer gives a real honest assessment of himself, because he calls himself arrogant in the book and he calls himself basically an a-hole. And so some people are like, wow, he's really honest about who he is. But to me, I think that is largely just a sham, because when you really make it part of your personality to be arrogant or to be a jerk or to be an a-hole, when you really admit that, then you're not really so much that person. You're just acting that way because that's your persona. That is your public image. But as to the actual writing of the book, I'm really leery here because it was pretty descriptive, but I couldn't really quite tell if it was poor, unnecessary description or if it was good description. I would kind of lean toward thinking it was over description. For instance, early on in the book, Mailer spends about 3 pages between saying the phone rang and he answered it. There's about 3 pages in between there where he talks about his views on the phone ringing. And 3 pages. It's just like, come on, get on with it. Just answer the phone. So the book was kind of over descriptive, but I'm not going to dock the book points for that. What I really need to do is read another book by Mailer, and it'll probably be Tough Guys Don't Dance. Because this one I didn't really get a sense of if he's a good writer or not. So I would give this book a very slim 3 stars. I didn't really enjoy it all that much, but I still think it's overall good that he wrote it. But I hope he wrote something better in his life. I hope this isn't Mailer at his best. And last, that brings us to Gore Vidal. So I was pretty nervous going into this book because Vidal is known as kind of an intellectual guy. So I thought this book would be pretty dry, wordy, long-winded, using 50 words when 5 would do, using 10 paragraphs when 1 would do. And to a point, that was true. I do think the book was about 100 pages too long, but that's not actually going to factor into the rating, because I did think Vidal's description was pretty masterful. His description is one of the better examples I've come across in writing. He has a very good use of vocabulary, and I don't really know how to describe it. It's also the case with Walter Moore's in a way, over here. He will use words a lot, and you don't think you're coming across the same word twice. And it's not really true, because I know it's definitely not the case, but it seems like every word is fresh, every word is new, and that's kind of the way it is with Vidal. He has a very good vocabulary. He's real good at description, about using language, about pacing. I was just really impressed with Gore Vidal's writing. However, it wasn't quite 5-star material. It wasn't quite a masterpiece. It was really well done. It was real masterfully done in a way. But it wasn't a masterpiece. It wasn't an epic book. It was just a really good book, written really well, but not something that really blew me away. There were a few problems with the book. One of them is that there's this main character, John Hay, who was one of President Lincoln's staffers in some way. I don't know, I should know this because I'm a history buff. I'd never actually heard of John Hay before reading this book. He is a historical character though. But the thing is, this book is set just after the Spanish-American War, so early 1900s. And this guy, John Hay, he continually thinks about Lincoln. Pretty much everything that would happen, he would think back and think about Lincoln. And almost every paragraph, at least every scene he was in, he would think about Lincoln. And it was just tiresome, like, oh God, this guy is obsessed with Lincoln. I'm also not going to dock the book points for this, but the perspectives of the book shifted a lot. It jumped around to a few different characters. And that works sometimes, but for this book, I think it kind of worked against it because I could never really tell who was supposed to be the protagonist, who is the main character. So ultimately I thought it was really just too much John Hay. And I was just getting tired of him because it's like, why am I still reading about this guy? So, I don't know. That's kind of a part where the book began to lose me. So in the end, I am going to give this book 4 stars. Vidal definitely caught my attention with his book. I really respect him as a writer now because, again, he's really good at descriptions. And he's a pretty good storyteller too. He's a little bit too long, but I think that's okay. It wasn't terribly too long. I did enjoy the book. I enjoyed the writing. So Gore Vidal went up quite a few points in my view. So in the end, it's 4 stars. It's not a masterpiece, and it does have some flaws. But overall, I was definitely impressed with his book. So I'm pretty excited to read Burr. Okay, that is it for the January wrap-up. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Whew, that book was heavy.